Hello and welcome. Thank you all. We're going to wait for a minute for everybody to join us. Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to L2b Aviation's Global Aviation News live stream. Today we will be discussing emerging drone technology and the global regulations governing this, or I should say the global regulations trying to keep up with the rapidly emerging technology. We're going to discuss some really interesting topics on this. I'm excited. First, I'd like to introduce our panelists, Nicole Cunha with Bash and Ramey in Brazil, José Elías Del Hierro with Del Hierro Abogados in Colombia, who just recently celebrated 41 years in business. Congratulations, José Elías, and your firm. And last but not least, Gabriela Alfaro with Nassar Abogados in Costa Rica. Thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to take a minute to talk a little bit about L2b Aviation. It is a network of nearly 50 law firms spanning the globe, 58 different countries. We have some law firms that represent more than one country, like Nassar Abogados has most of Central America, I think, covered. And our members are carefully selected and vetted from leading specialist aviation firms in their jurisdiction. Our members are widely recognized for being specialists in aviation and for providing tailored, responsive, consistent, and personalized service. Aviation is specialized, and your attorney should be too. And our network can help you find legal counsel in a foreign jurisdiction that can help you with your aviation-related needs. And with that, I would like to turn the floor over to Nicole with Bash and Ramey in Brazil to give us her update on drone regulations in Brazil. Nicole?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Tracy, for the introduction. I'm really happy here to give you an overview of the drones regulation in Brazil. Due to our time, I cannot go deeply into details because we have a lot to talk. But if you have doubts, please send your messages in the chat, and I will be happy to try to reply to them. So we are going here on definitions, the authorities involved, the current legislation, the category of remoted pilot aircraft, the registration process, liabilities, and the current operations. So initially, I'd like to emphasize that drones are considered aircraft, and this is a concept from the that will be used by my next colleagues as well. Drones are considered aircraft by the definition that was adopted not only by the Brazilian Aeronautical Code, but generally by the OACI and then by other jurisdictions, which is any device that is maneuverable in flight that can support itself and circulate in airspace through aerodynamic reactions capable of transporting people or things. So drone is like a generic name used by the public. It is a remoted pilot aircraft, which means a manned aircraft piloted from a remoted pilot station for purpose other than recreation. And then we have a distinction for autonomous aircraft, which means an unmanned aircraft which during its operation, a remote pilot intervention in the flight or part thereof is not possible. So Brazil, among other jurisdictions, has ratified the Chicago Convention, which in Article 8 prohibits the operation of autonomous aircraft unless strictly supervised. In relation to the Brazilian authorities involved, the first one, we have different authorities. And the first one we are going to talk here is about the Brazilian National Civil Aviation Authority, which is the competent authority, who is the competent authority for regulating aircraft transport generally. And because drones is inserted in the definition of aircraft, we have ANAC as one of the main authorities regulating this. type of operation. We have a specific legislation for drones regulation since 2017 in Brazil, which is the RBACE. And over the years, ANAC has amended this legislation in order to trying to put it in the reality of the advancement of the technology over the years, which is not easy. Yeah, and it's important to say that the RBAC E94 and the scope of this presentation will mainly refer to private use of drones and remote pilot aircraft, not public operation by authorities, because then we have a separated regulation over it. And above all, we are going to have the Brazilian Aeronautical Code, which is the federal law that establishes the primary rules in relation to air transport. The second authority we have here is the Air Traffic Control Department that rules the use of the airspace. And then we have here a list of some regulations already in place. I will not go deeply in each of it, but if you go to the DSEA website, you can also have very easy information and listed all these regulations. But I would like to focus on the SARPAS, which is the specific system that was developed by the DSEA for authorizations of flights for remote pilot aircraft. We also have the Brazilian National Agency of Telecommunications, who is responsible for regulating the certification of drones technology, the radio frequency, and the type of certification and how the process will follow will depend on the complexity of the device. You also can have a list of all these regulations and process in the Anatel website. We have the Ministry of Agriculture in case of pulverization activities. Then you're going to have some rules that would specifically apply to that. And the Ministry of Defense in case of aerial assessment by authorities. Then you're going to have this to be specifically regulated by the Ministry of Defense, and you have a specific decree with regulations for that. So for the categories of remote pilot aircraft, the RBAC 94 from ANAC divided the RPAs in three categories. The first one is RPAs with maximum takeoff weight above 150 kilos. And in this case, if you have any drone or RPA in this category, it must follow the generic registration of the Brazilian Aeronautical Registry as applicable for big aircraft like commercial aircraft. Classes 2 and 3 is where we have most drones. And Class 2 will be for maximum takeoff weight of 25 kilos and equal to or below 150 kilos. And Class 3 with maximum takeoff weight to or below 25 kilos. So it's important to say that ANAC developed a specific system named CISAN for the registration of remote pilot aircraft. It's a very easy system for the operator, the user, to upload the information and to get the necessary information for the system of the remote pilot aircraft and the aircraft itself in the sequence. To finalize in relation to the categories, since the beginning of 2023, in case of agriculture for pulverization services, they are included in Class 3, regardless of the maximum takeoff weight, provided they maintain visual line of sight or extended visual line of sight and operated below 400 feet above ground level. So CISANT, as I said, is the specific system developed by ANAC. So it allows manufacturers or designers to register the systems of the remote pilot aircraft directly, and also for the operator or users to register the drones directly. ANAC has from time to time published updated lists of such projects in their website. Remoted pilot aircraft, including drones and systems, must be registered, and registration is mandatory. In this isn't, it is possible to register classes 2 and 3. And this isn't will divide categories of drones like basic category, basic drones, advanced drones, and experimental drones. I will not go deeply into each of those, but it's just to say that depending on the category, the requirements of certification and inspection for approval will be different. The registration in the CISANT is much easier if you're going to use the registration for general big aircraft. So it's an operator and owner register. The user is responsible for inputting the RPA information into the system, including names of the operator, the owner, the manufacturer, and the pilot. Each RPA must have a certificate of airworthiness unless it is operating with a maximum takeoff weight of 250 grams and below 25 kilos, and is flying beyond the visual line of sight and under 400 feet. As I mentioned, the RPA in Class 1 should follow the Brazilian Aeronautical Registry registration as a commercial aircraft. The CISANT also made easier the transfer of ownership. You can simply go to the website and transfer the ownership of the aircraft. And then we go to a second important system from the Air Traffic Control Department, which is named SARPAS, where the operator needs to request authorization to operate the RPA in a specific area. Insurance is mandatory for any RPA with maximum takeoff weight over 250 grams, with exception for RPA used in agriculture since 2023. In terms of liability and the use of drones, the liability falls on the explorer, following what is defined in the Brazilian Aeronautical Code. The explorer or operator can be a company or individual, owner or not, legitimately exploring an aircraft for profit or not. Liability remains with the registered explorer with ANAC, even if the explorer operates the drone using agents or any representatives. In case there is no registration with ANAC, joint liability apply between the operator and the owner of the drone. In types of liabilities, the same liabilities applicable to general aviation are applicable to the use and operation of drones, as they are considered aircraft. So we have general administrative penalties listed in the Brazilian Aeronautical Code or issued by ANAC, DSEA, and Anatel, and apply to the use of operation of drones. Illegal operations, you have the consequence of penal liabilities, and then you have the Brazilian law of penal violation and the Brazilian penal code. So penalties vary from custodial sentences to imprisonment, depending on the seriousness of the crime. Civil liability will be ruled by the Brazilian Civil Code, and you have the protection of the constitutional rights in relation to image, violation, private life, and the right of compensation for material or moral damage. So the Brazilian Aeronautical Code will stipulate fines, suspensions, license cancellation, detention, interdiction, and seizure, depending on the level of illegal act. Penal, civil, administrative liabilities ruled by different authorities should apply also. In relation to the authorities involved in an accident, you're going to have, depending if you have the type of investigation, you're going to also have the police and the judicial courts involved in case of penal liability and crimes, and civil liability by judicial courts. Aeronautical Trial Board was created and is listed in the Brazilian Aeronautical Code, subordinated to the Ministry of Aeronautics, and have administrative ascertainment for in case of accidents or incidents. And finally, you have the CENIPA, who is the Brazilian aviation authority responsible for the investigation of aeronautical accidents, only with the purpose of accident prevention. Finally, and the last slide is an example of the current operations that are going on in Brazil. The SEA and ANAC have been certifying and authorizing drones and special flights with segregated airspace. And some of those activities include small cargo in isolated areas, capture of images in public events, aerial assessment projects, pulverization in agriculture, and rescue operations with fire in the Amazon forest or Pantanal. Thank you so much. I hope you have enjoyed the presentation. I think I'm in my time. I didn't exceed the time. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Nicole. That was really wonderful. It's a lot of governing authorities, governing operations of drones. Perhaps we might touch on how that's going when we get to the challenges section. Gabriela, would you like to tell us about Costa Rica?
Hi, yes, thank you. Thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Tracy. First of all, good morning, everybody. I hope you are enjoying our session today, and hopefully by the end of it, you will have a profound knowledge on how Latin America is regulating the drones. Well, first of all, I would like to talk about the regulation, or at least the main applicable legal framework in Costa Rica, because there is more regulation applicable, but this is the main one for drones. So first, we have the Costa Rican Aeronautical Regulations on Remotely Piloted Aircraft System. By its acronym, we will call it RAC-ARPAS. This is an executive decree which was published and came to effect last Friday, so it's quite recent. Its application, it's to the civil ARPAs, and it excludes everything that belongs to agricultural aviation activities, as well as the ones used for leisure in some conditions, because it's restricted to a range of 40 meters. We also have the regulation for agricultural aviation activities, which is another executive decree. This one is important because it has specific dispositions regarding environmental and health concerns, and also it takes additional safety measures to avoid any issue with the operations. And then we have the operational directive. This was first issued in 2017, so it has been effective on a while. Actually, all current permits, licenses were issued with this operational directive, which is now, it was substituted by the Costa Rican regulation, the RAC-ARPAS. So it's now not into effect. But however, current operations or current permits are still valid till its expiration date, and also companies that were using the operational directive were given 6 months to adjust any changes needed to the ones applicable under RAC-ARPAS. And also we have the General Telecommunications Law, and based on the National Frequency Allocation Plan, it will depend on the type of permit that you will need for the use of the radio frequencies. It might be free use bands, and then you will only have to issue an homologation process that basically is just registration of the devices, so you will know, or that that it will not cause any interference to the telecommunication system. And then if it's needed by the National Frequency Allocation Plan, then an enabling title is also needed. This is a longer process and have many other requirements. As the categories, we have different categories based on sizes, as well as, or similar to what Nicole has. However, I think that the most valid or category that is mentioned in the regulation is that it is divided in commercial operations, meaning that it has a lucrative purpose, or non-commercial operations. In commercial operations, there are already, companies operating under this title, and they are using aerial photography, land survey, observation, and patrolling, and they are also using aerial fumigation. And then we have the non-commercial operations, which are much more restricted, and there's less requirements in order to get the permit, and it's related to search and rescue flights, production and maintenance test flights, demonstrations to the authorities of different stakeholders, but they are not open to the public. We also have research and development flights in order to demonstrate that the operation is safe, or that they want to prove a new device. So these are also on the non-commercial category. And finally, there we have the flights related to the organization, which is a little bit of self-service. At the beginning, the main focus of the regulation in drones was to maintain safety. So it was, was imposing a lot of restrictions. These restrictions have now been, a little bit, some of them have been removed, another one are more flexible, but currently the restrictions in order to operate, or the restrictions rules are that it is prohibited to operate in certain areas. And these are published in an aeronautical information publication, so that all parties are aware that this is a restricted or prohibited area to operate. There is also a provision to operate in a radius of 8 kilometers from an aerodrome or above 100 meters above ground level. However, I must say that these are allowed some exceptions as long as there is an authorization from the Civil Aviation Authority, and there is not published. There is also a restriction to operate above 120 meters above ground level in controlled airspace. And obviously, it cannot be an obstacle to another aircraft or to a runway. In terms of the registration of the drones, there is the RPAS with a maximum takeoff weight exceeding 25 kilos, and that they hold a type and airworthiness certificate must be registered in the National Aircraft Registry, which is managed by the Public Registry of Costa Rica. Then we have RPAS weighing less than 25 kilos, which are only required to have an identification plate. This is in order, if something happens, there is a number, a name of the company that is responsible. And any other drone must be registered at the Civil Aviation Authority. There is as well a registry available on their website, and it's also quite easy to use. So that's the registration obligation in Costa Rica. In terms of liability, there is a requirement for RPAS use to have an insurance policy. It is a civil liability against third parties. Also, we have, liability established in the Civil Aviation Act. It is not specifically to the use of drones. However, it might be applicable to their operations. And there we have the imposition of fines, economic fines. And then we also have the possibility of the cancellation of the operating license or the authorizations, and even, to remove the pilot license if applicable. We also have civil and or criminal liabilities based on the Civil and Criminal Code in Costa Rica. And we also have the data protection law, which we have a general legal framework, and it might, open a procedure against the company if it's data privacy concern or violation of the law. And then it might finish on the imposition of economical fines and also the suspension of the database, which is only applicable if it's, something quite serious. And then we have some requirements or additional requirements that we wanted to mention that I think are relevant in terms you need to have our operating license or an authorization. It depends on whether it is a commercial operation or a non-commercial operation, but the company will have to have an operations manual. Also, if the maximum takeoff weight is over 25 kilos, it is necessary to have a maintenance program. Otherwise, the maintenance of the or recommended maintenance by the fabricator is the one that is applicable. There's also a need to do a risk analysis to assess each operation and to minimize any risk. And we also have to implement security measures to protect against acts of unlawful interference. As I mentioned before, we have a data protection authority and a data protection law. However, there's also data privacy requirements on the regulation applicable to ARPAs. And finally, there is an obligation to notify any accident or incident that might occur during the drone operation. And same as Brazil, the purpose of this notification is to prevent another accident or incident to occur. So the authority will investigate any concern to issue a report where they are letting know other operators how to or not to commit, let's say, the same mistake and avoid a repetition of this situation that was mentioned. So that's from my side, and I will give the floor to José Elías.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. That was really interesting. I find it interesting, the telecommunications conversation and the bandwidth. I had never really thought through that. So that's an interesting concept to me. José Elías, would you like to tell us about drone regulations in Colombia?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning to the audience. To share with us some minutes to talk about one of the things we love to work in is the drones industry. Thank you, Tracy, Nicole, and Gabriela, for sharing with us the ideas in each one of your jurisdictions. First of all, I want to share with you what's happening in Colombia regarding the drones activities. Last week, there was an international drone fair here in Bogota, where not only lawyers of our industry attend this, also operators, manufacturers, insurance company, business people, all highlighting the growing of our industry and importance of drones. It was 3 fantastic days, and many of the conclusions I will present today to everyone and come from that event, meaning this is a very updated information I want to share with you. In the first part, I will talk about some numbers and statistics on drones here in Colombia to give you a sense of the scale of this activity here in our country. In the next chapters, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and the 6th, I will touch on how ICAO, the OASI, has been working towards standardizing aviation regulation, including those related to drones. That is why the information received by Nicole from Brazil and Gabriela from Costa Rica are similar to our information here in Colombia and here in this side of the Atlantic. Finally, in the last chapter, I will discuss the challenge with Nicole and Gabriela and the people who want to share with us this information. The drones in Colombia, it's really interesting why our Civil Aviation Authority has been taking the drone industry seriously, and they create a strategic for the drones for the next 2023 until 2026. In this strategic plan, as I mentioned, the Civil Aviation Authority have a vision to position to Colombia in this benchmark in terms of the safe integration of drones and try to work in 6 different lines of actions. The first one, the regulation. I'm going to talk about the regulation after. The organization and structure, competent personnel, and training. We're going to see with the statistics I will share with you in a couple of minutes how it will be important to this industry to go into competent personnel structures and of course teaching this information. Third point, technological support systems. The 4th, operational safety, civilian and military and front of drones country culture. Then Colombia from the Civil Aviation Authority are working hard in this sense. Some interesting in the point of the next one, the legal framework. Thank you, Tracy. I'm only going to mention our regulation. Of course, Colombia is signatory of the Chicago Convention of 1944, and in the 8th article that already Nicole mentioned, in that point we begin working in the drones industry. Then Colombia, we have two laws, 105 and 336, the National Transport Statute, which rule the aviation mode of transportation. Then, and this is an important for the drones industry, the Circular 328 AN 19 of ICAO draft the first regulation to try to standardize the industry of drones worldwide. Colombia adopt a big part of this 328 circular and draft the first regulatory in Colombia, the number 002 of July 27 on 2015, the first regulation on drones, and then began to working in another one that was on September 25, 2023, and that regulation established the RAC 100. RAC is the Colombian Aviation Rules, expressly regulation for the Colombian drones industry. And I'm going to talk an additional in the next slide. Well, this is interesting. The civil aviation conduct a survey among drone business owners and enthusiasts, as maybe a lot of one of the people who are here. And as you will see, it highlights several key issues, particularly the need for more training. For some interesting conclusions from the survey, we can see here, most of the drones have been acquired in Colombia, 76%, and 16 in the United States. That's why in Colombia we have a lot, not only manufacturers of drones, of course, the Chinese drones, we have a lot of them. And in the category A, I'm going to go to category A after, 256 respondents operate in this category. The following information was obtained. 88% respond do know the regulation. 88 of the individuals knows the regulation of drones. 12% no. That's interesting. How we work with drones and we don't know anything about the regulations. Another information, 94% state that they do comply with the regulations. 6% indicate that they do not comply with the regulation. And the reasons that they argue are, I don't know the regulations, but I know the regulations, but consider that they are difficult to comply with. 64%. Another one said, does not consider it necessary to comply with regulation, 40%. And what's happening at this point? The first conclusion, there's still a high level of informality in the business sector, in the business of the drones. 12%, they do not know about the regulation. 6%, 40%, they don't comply with the regulation. We are really informally using the drones. And many operators are not interested in becoming formalized. A second conclusion could be there is a lack of knowledge about regulation. And of course, the third one could be the process to comply with the regulations are often difficult to navigate in it. Then we can see which could be the line of the authorities and of course the people from the industry to work on. We continue with the survey. For this category A, responded mainly carry out air operations. As already see in the presentation of Nicole as well as in the Gabriel, the first activities are acquisition of images and data, not applicable for surveillance and private security services. The other one, operation for recreational purpose. 36% respond that they have registered their aircraft with the civil aviation, and 64 of them no. Continue with the informality of our industry. The reason for not registering in the drones with the civil aviation here in Colombia, the first one, lack of knowledge of the how to do that registration, 33%. To process the register is complex. It's not easy. We have to talk with the lawyer, I don't know, 27%, and they don't consider it necessary to register, 12%. The other one, Tracy, please. And this other category B, taking into account that 144 respond and operate category B, 95% of those surveyed do not know, do or know the regulation, 5%, and 87, they comply with the regulation, and 30% do not comply. We have to bear in mind that this category B are the commercial and most important industry in drones, the more specific and more professional. They know the regulation, but consider the difficult to comply with, 78%, and it is not considered necessary to comply with them, with the regulation, 5%. Then it's a very high numbers to bear in mind. In addition, for category B, response mainly carry out air operation related with, as we already mentioned, acquisition of imaging data, as well as missionary activities of the state entities. And here's another thing really important. 65% of those surveyed respond that they have completed the registration process of the drones before the civil aviation, and 35% no. And the same reasons: lack of knowledge of the procedure to register. The procedure to register is complex. They do not consider it necessary. As we can see, until today, the drone industry is informal in a very big percentage of the industry. Continue with this survey. 68% of those surveys are registered the pilots. The pilot, not the drones, the pilots. 32% no. Regarding the request for permits from the civil aviation to carry these operations, respond that the following: 44% do request permission, 56% do not request permission. The reason, the same one: I'm not clear about the procedure to requesting permits, 80%. I do not consider it's necessary, 50%. The process to obtain flight authorization is delayed, 37%. Then this survey, it's really interesting because they send highlights to what can we do in the next years, in the next months. Thank you, Tracy. The same in this other, regarding the request for permits from the civil aviation to carry out the operations. 44% request permission for special operation. 56% do not request permission. The reason, the similar, and I'm already mentioned before. Okay, now it's interesting to share this statistic. We have seen some of the survey results, and now let's look some statistics provided by the civil aviation. Since 2017, the increase in registered drones operators in 2017 was 0. In 2024, this year, was 2,524 drones operators registered. As you can see, the increase in Colombia was really nice. In the case of request operation for capture of imaging data, aspersion, instruction and training, drones delivery, dispersions, captures of imaging, security of surveillance purposes, capture imaging for media, missionary activities, and swarms are the most requested operations in Colombia in civil aviation. Please. Now, the registration of pilots in 2017 was 0. In 2024, was 5,371 pilots registered. In history of increase in registration drones, the before one was pilot, this one are drones registered. 2017, 0. 2024, 4,168. And see this another point, request for flight authorization. We have to do it if we are in the in special category. I'm going back in a couple of minutes. For request for flying authorization in 2017 was 220, and 2023, not 2024, because the information I have from 2024 was until July. 2023 was 1,226 flight authorizations. And this is interesting. The instructions centers accepted and authorized by the civil aviation in Colombia to give instructions to the drones industry was a number of 308. A lot of instruction centers accepted by the civil aviation. Okay, continue with the ideas of the authorities and the legislations or regulations. Colombia, in our case, was clearly the civil aviation is the main authority, but of course, other agencies also need to approve drones operations. In this case, for example, the superintendents of surveillance must approve the use of drones by security companies in addition to the registration and authorization provided by the civil aviation. Of course, the Ministry of Defense, if we are working with drones in surveillance issues with a military effect, of course, the Agriculture Ministry, if we are going to work with certain kinds of agriculture matters and so on. The next one, please. This is the categories of drones here in Colombia. We have 3 categories. The first one is an open category. That's the name gave by the RAC 100, open categories, specific category, and certified category. The open category corresponds to non-commercial operation without intention of profits. That's the drones maximum with 25 kilos of weight. The drones in this category must be registered unless the weight of these drones are less than 200 grams, in which case registration is not required. It's interesting that RAC 100 specifically states that when a drone is operated by children or teenagers, the parents, the legal guardians, or the registered owner, or the responsibility for any of those damages. Then that's expressed regulation in this kind of drones, because it's typically that the child and the teenagers work or fly this kind of drones. Specific category correspond to operation with drones of any weight but not exceed 250 kilos for purpose commercial and public entities that do not belong to the state aviation. This specific category is very interesting because there are drones that must be registered, and flight can only be conducted by licensed pilot, which authorization of the civil aviation. Remember that we have a lot of pilots not registered with the civil aviation. And the certified category, the last one, correspond to drones remotely piloted whose flight conditions and purpose of use are similar to those of manner aviations. These drones are really interesting because they require a type certificate and airworthiness certificate and must operate under instruments flight rules. And the pilots must have a remote pilot's license and the aeronautical medical certificate and specific training. Then, this certificate category of drones are really a professional ones. Also, for those kind of drones who carry not only cargo, also passengers. That will be a very interesting idea for another webinar to this kind of certified category drones. The next one, please. Okay, I would like to talk to the insurance policies and responsibilities that was mentioned by Nicole and Gabriela. Here in Colombia, we have to bear in mind, I am okay in time, maybe one minute.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the section where we talk about challenges We don't really have any questions from the audience, so I think it would be a good time to talk about challenges.
Okay.
I would make a comment about kids and drones. When my son was little, he would get drones and we could only ever fly them into trees. And we only ever got 2 or 3 flights out of each drone before. We never got very far in our drone development.
Okay. Okay, then continue with. Okay, thank you.
So now we'll just talk about challenges and the challenges that we see coming. We don't have any questions from the audience, so we'll talk about the challenges of drones and the emerging technology and the regulations trying to govern the emerging technology in each of your jurisdictions.
I think that one of the challenges is how the authorities, first of all, I think the authorities need to be working together as a team, because you have different types of regulations involved, the use of airspace, the common use of airspace by different players. So the way you're going to segregate the airspace for the use of remote pilot aircraft, for example, to avoid the accidents near areas like airports or military areas, and the illegal use of remote pilot aircraft. And as also my colleagues mentioned and José Elías listed, there are many users that do not register the drones. So if it's already difficult to inspect or control the illegal use of drones, and principally in terms of liability, to get into a person that has its drone not registered, for example. So this is a hard work for the authorities to go through, among other things.
Yes, I agree, Nicole. I think that I think it's a concern on all countries. For instance, in Costa Rica, it's prohibited to operate drones in populated areas, and it's quite common to see them. So, there is debate. Do you call the police? Do you call the civil aviation authority? How they will know who is the person operating this drone? So I think this is a concern because most of them are not registered properly, or they don't even know the regulation. So they might not even be aware that they are not allowed to operate in these, populated areas. And it might cause an accident, or it might cause somebody's mistrust. They might think it's trying to get inside the house or something, and they are just trying to gather information on how the house works or the house structure is. So I think it's a concern in all countries. Also, I think one of the main concerns, or what the authorities are working with or trying to get, is a balance between safety and not over restrict the operations of the use of drones. I think this is a constant battle, at least here in Costa Rica. I think they do not want any accident with drones, or, and they are afraid of allowing too much, but also they don't want to restrict it at a point that the operations are not coming to Costa Rica, and to avoid, being a hub in the region. So, for instance, we have in Nicaragua, we have the opposite, and the use of drones are banned, and it's quite, restricted. So I think that this is also a battle that the authorities have, and at least here in Costa Rica, we are seeing a lot of interest, similar to Colombia, actually, where a lot of companies want to get certified to operate. But the civil aviation authority is unable to cope with the high demand. So we are facing, many delays on the issue of the authorizations and the operating licenses. And we also have and I think Tracy mentioned it, a concern in terms of the radio frequency, because the radio frequency, if they need an enabling title, then this process might take longer, or approximately a year. So this means that the operating license will be granted before the enabling title is authorized. So they will have to wait for the telecommunication authorization, in order to actually use or operate with the drone.
Well, and to your point about calling the authorities for violations, how responsive, how much bandwidth or capacity do the authorities have to handle drone violations? How much do they know? To Jose Elias's point about training, which I'm not sure training involved training the authorities, but I suspect the authorities don't really know what to do or necessarily have the bandwidth to handle some of the complaints coming through. What do you see with that, if anything?
Yeah, I know that, I know of a person who called the police and they told her, like, oh, we cannot help you with that. Like, there's nothing we can do to take this drone down. And the Civil Aviation Authority does not work on weekends. So these are some issues that must be addressed, obviously.
Specifically for Brazil, the police is the authority in charge to ban the illegal use of drones in some area. And also we have the DSEA published a normative that in one of its appendix has a list of the authorities in charge to inspect or regulate the use of drones, so where people can make the complaints for investigation. But of course, in a scenario, an emergency scenario where we had in the beginning of this year of a drone operating in an area or a radio frequency intervening next to airport, where you can simply stop the operation of airport, where we had in London a few years ago. So this is a lot of economic things that we also need to consider, and principally accidents that can occur. So it's hard to deal with this, and also we cannot simply, in my opinion, ban the use of drones, because it's the development of technology. So it's important that we try to find a solution among the players, the commercial companies involved in this, with this aircraft, the players involved, the authorities involved. So when we have a group working together, like doing public audiences in order to have try to get the better legislation and regulation according to the operations. Yeah, I think there is no other way we can go. That's the way we need to follow. Yeah, I was checking here, José Elías, after checking your presentation, that currently in the latest publication in ANAC website, Brazil has 165,000 drones registered.
It's a lot.
That's a lot. And those numbers that you gave, Jose Elias, were really interesting. I mean, we talked about rapidly emerging technology. We talk about drones coming, but your numbers really showed the reality of how many drones are coming and how quickly, and the uptick in registrations in a very short period of time. What makes Colombia such a popular spot for drones?
Well, here in Colombia, it's really a good opportunity to do this, because the authority is seriously working on the regulation and try to be very, very effective in this kind of industry. Then it's a good place to see the opportunities with the drones industry. Gabriela and Nicole mentioned a very interesting thing. The authorities, the police, are the one who have to handle this kind of drones doing bad things. I want to point out one thing really interesting. In the fair we went last week, as mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, they are drones companies present rifles to chase drones, as well drones with nets to chase drones. Then that means that they are drones companies who likes chase drones. How to rule that? There is no authorities that can do that. It's really interesting. Those are the challenges, because remember that the technology runs faster than the regulations. The entrepreneurs are really, really nice and smart to what can we do with drones, and if the regulation didn't say nothing, we can do it. Then the challenges are really, really nice and really, really big. Preparing this webinar, we talk about the use of drones to violate the privacy rights. If I have a drone in front of my windows, washing my windows, and they have a camera and they are with a video of everything I'm doing in my house, what happened with that? Those are really, really nice, those challenges.
They're really, really scary.
Yes. Yeah, and in terms of privacy, José Elías, at least here, the RAC ARPAs mentioned that the Civil Aviation Authorities is able to initiate a procedure for data privacy violations. So this is also in conflict with the data protection law, which has a proper authority. So there's also a conflict of rules, So this is also a challenge that we might need to face, or that the regulation might need to be amendment to eliminate that disposition.
Exactly.
Certainly. And in Brazil, where you have 5 regulating bodies, I can't imagine there's not some conflict between regulations somewhere, right?
They have been doing a great job together, and for many years, and try to equalize the needs of the commercial, not only the commercial, but also the private use of drones, but principally in commercial activities. So I would say that they have been doing a great job. At least for now, I have not seen such conflict, but they have been doing a great complementary job among each other. And this is it's beautiful to see how the players and the authorities have been working together on this.
That's good. José Elías, were you going to say something?
No.
Okay, sorry. I am.
Yes, sorry.
I think that at least in the part of agricultural services aviation, here there is one regulation that was issued by the Ministry of Transportation, the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Agriculture. So I think there was a common, I don't know, there was an idea to work together, the 3 ministries, to have a uniform way of rule these operations. At least here, the agricultural part or the use of drones in agricultural has been quite important. We do depend, our economy depends a lot on agriculture. So there is a specific need. And it's interesting because most of the accidents or aviation accidents in Costa Rica, at least, are in part of agriculture, and it's also human mistakes. So a lot of people are saying the drones will help minimize these accidents or incidents in the country.
Yes, I see in this industry, this is like the influencers industry. Why? Because I believe of the self-regulation, or I have to be responsible with using drones, as well as the influencers in the webs making a lot of noise. You have to be seriously with this profession. You have to be seriously with how to enjoy and how to work on it. And if the rules are not enough, you have to be really responsible, as well as in the industry of the influencers. We have that point. The self-regulation could be the name. I don't know if it's technically mentioned in that way, but you have to do the things in good faith.
Thank you all very much. We're coming up on our time. So I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. If you would like to get in touch with any of our panelists today. Their emails are listed here, and they would be happy to discuss this further with you. I'd also like to, if you would like to visit our website, L2b Aviation.com, all of their contact information is there as well. And each of them can be found on LinkedIn as well as L2b Aviation. So stay in touch with us to keep up with everything that's going on in our network and all the exciting news regarding aviation around the globe. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.